I'm Sheila McNeely, and I'm Knox County Master Gardener, and I'm so glad that each of you are here today. I am truly glad that y'all are here today. And I've been a Master Gardener since 2019, and I have learned a tremendous amount of gardening and fun things about plants. And I think the biggest thing that I have learned is there is so much more to learn about plants. And you just kind of get the tip of the iceberg. And the biggest thing I've learned is how to go and research to find out more stuff. So that is what we're going to do today, is I'm going to give you some research-based information about bulbs. Bulbs is a very big, broad topic, and the more I got into it, that's the hardest part about planning for things like this, is because it is so much, and I'm so excited to tell you about it, but I have to narrow it down because we have a limited amount of time. So we're going to have we have like a little blueprint of what we're going to cover today, and it's just the basics. So it's not to say that we can't have a more in-depth class later, but you'd have to write on the back that you want a more in-depth class. But these are our objectives today. And we're going to identify bulbs and talk about hardy bulbs today. And the selection, location, preparation, and timing. So the selection is how to select a bulb, the right, a good bulb. And then we're going to talk about where bulbs like to be. And then we're going to prepare the soil. And then we're going to talk about when to plant them. And then also how to plant them. So we are covering fall bulbs. And when you plant fall bulbs, they're going to bloom in the spring. And then the spring bulbs, you plant them in the spring and they bloom in the summer. So there are two different types of bulbs that people talk about. Now, I'm going to give you a new word, and it is geophyte. So a geophyte, a lot of people use that interchangeably with the word bulb. So a bulb is any type of perennial plant that has its storage underground. Now the storage is for reproductive, because it doesn't have fruit on the top. It has its storage under the bottom, and it contains water, and it contains all the nutrients, starches, and things like that. But that's where it stores it. And a bulb, there's a lot of interesting things about bulbs. Bulbs can, they're perennial for the most part, and they can grow anywhere from the tundra to the rainforest, and really dark places, and then they also can grow in the desert, and then in really cold places, and really dry places, the desert. So it's very interesting that they have such now that it's different types of bulbs, but you can find bulbs just all across the world, so it's rather interesting. And one of the reasons why bulbs are really interesting is because you can, well, there's many things, but the thing that they are very drought tolerant, most of them, and so you don't have to worry about watering so much. So they're good for those yard smart yards when you're not wanting to water too much, and so they're really good about that. Now, another thing about bulbs, and I do have my cheat sheet because I have so many things to tell you, so I've got a couple of things I just don't want to forget. But the bulbs, they're divided into different categories. And so the categories of a bulb are true bulbs, corms, tubers, rhizomes, and tuberous roots. Now today we're going to focus on true bulbs, corms, and rhizomes because those are the ones that are hardy, most of those, and you plant them in the fall. Well, I'll tell you about the other two just briefly so that you will know what they are. But the bulbs, how they just decide which one, where they go, what category it is how the bulb is formed and where it's stored, what the storage. It's a fleshy storage organ underneath the ground, and how that is formed is how they get into these different categories. So let's go to the first one, and it'll make more sense when I go to the first one. So true bulbs. So when you think about a true bulb, like daffodils, tulips, snowdrops, and allium, those are ones that are hardy. That means that they can be planted in the fall and they bloom in the spring. And also, one of the things is an onion is a true bulb, and an amaryllis is a true bulb. But this one you would not plant. It's not as hardy because we're in a different zone. We're in zone B, and if you're North Knoxville, you can go up to zone A. But that's another thing you have to pay attention to is when you're buying bulbs. Your success is that doesn't depend on your success. Your success is what zone it is. So if you're out of the zone it's supposed to be in, it might bloom one year, but you might not have success the next year because it might be too cold. he doesn't travel well, obviously. But this, one of the interesting things about this, and I have other bulbs that are true bulbs, but a true bulb, and so this is easier for me to show you, a true bulb is actually specialized leaves that hold the storage. So that this is actually a leaf, and it's layers of leaves that hold the water and the nutrients in here. And so this is the bulb, but it's part of the leaf. And when you cut a true bulb in half, which I'm not going to do that because it's an onion and I'll start crying, it has circles. You can see those circles. And a garlic is also a true bulb, but it is loosely put together. So each one of these would have that, but it's so it's a little bit different, but they're both true bulbs. Now the other thing, these are paper whites and these are true bulbs, and I've got some other ones to show you. But there are two different kinds of true bulbs. So one of them is a tunicate bulb, and then the other one is an imbricate. Now a tunicate, you think about Robin Hood, he wore a tunic and those hose things, but we won't talk about that. But the tunic is a covering on the top that's protective. Now it's good, and when you think about your onion, you think about these paper whites, they have that white stuff that crumbles off, and that's a good thing because it protects it. A bulb underneath it has a lot of moisture, it has the nutrients, and you do not want it to dry out. So that's what this is here for, it has for a very good reason. The imbricate, they don't have that. And I don't think, I was trying to find an imbricate bulb, they don't have any covering, they're just a bulb, and they are the leaf structure, that's a specialized leaf structure. However, they don't have the tunic, so they dry out really fast. So they're going to be very expensive compared to the regular bulbs. And also the other thing is, they're fragile because they don't have that protective. I mean, it's more protection than you think. And so when a shipper or a grower is getting ready to prepare them for you, they have to take a lot more care in harvesting them and shipping them so that they don't dry out and they don't get damaged. The only one of the imbricate bulbs that I can find is like an Asian lily. Now, an Asian lily. They're different than your like Stella d'Oro or your tiger lilies or the other lilies. These lilies, they come up in one stalk and they have lots of leaves that come off the stalk. So that's the type of lily that is a true bulb. So let's see. Now the other thing that is interesting is this is the eye or the nose of the bulb, and then this is the basal plate, and that's the bottom of the bulb. So when we talk about that, and of course you can see the tunic on the outside, but the basal plate is like your little foot that goes down. So the next one is corms. And then also I want to show you that I did have and I'll show you these more, but I did buy a few of the bulbs so that you can see, because I think I might plant bulbs this year. So after doing this, so I'm really excited about that. But the corms are a little bit different. Sorry, I've got lots of cold in my throat. The corms are a little bit different, because they, as you can see on the picture over there, they are, so before, remember I said it was a bunch of leaves that are stuck together, they're specialized, and that's what forms the bulb. A corm is different, that is actually part of the stem. So that little, it's kind of like a nodule, like a little growth at the bottom of the stem, so it is part of the stem. Now, the crocus is the one that's hardy. And the lily, these are different kinds of, okay, this is a different lily, I'll tell you about that. But the gladiolas and the freesia, those are more corms that are planted in the spring for summer growth. So crocus is the main thing that is planted in the fall for spring. So that's why it says hardy. So you can, and I think on your sheet that it does tell you which ones are hardy and which ones aren't. Now, I will tell you that I did find anemones. And they're so cute, but I want you to come up and look at those in a few, and after the class. And then also I found this is the ranunculus, and those are really cool too. And I'll show you those in just more in a second, but these are also corms. And I did write, so when you come up to me, I wrote them on the bottom so you can see them. Because on the package, it says they're bulbs. Well, they're bulbs, but they're more specifically, they're corms. So that's rather interesting. And Linda, nodding away. I'll scoot over a little bit. So, one of the ways, they also have a tunicate, and so they're kind of hard to decide which is the difference between a crocus bulb because it has a tunicate and like a paper white. The way you can tell it is, remember, this is a specialized leaf, so when you cut it open, which I couldn't cut this one open, but if you cut it open, it has circles. If you cut this open, it actually is solid. So that's the difference between, that's how you know it's part of the stem. So a water chestnut, if you think about a water chestnut, and I could cut those open, they are solid on the inside. So that's a type of corn that you would eat. And I think that's one of the things I want to make sure I told you about is the water chestnut. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about, oh, well, they also do spread rapidly, but most of them are not hardy. But when I was out shopping, I did find that, so I was really excited to show y'all that. And just give me another reason to buy a plant, and so I did. So now the next thing is rhizomes. Now rhizomes, they are part of the stem, but they are not part of the main stem. They grow out, and that's the difference between the corms these grow out, and most of them, the canna, lily of the valley, bearded iris. Now this is different than the other iris. It's a dwarf iris, not a Siberian iris, but they're dwarf irises. Those are actually true bulbs. So when you start looking at bulbs like irises, do your little research on it so that you'll know when to plant them. But the bearded iris, they can be planted in the fall. And then your calla lilies, they can be, and then there's pictures of it so that you can see which one is which. So let's see. Now the other thing I wanted to tell you about was, remember we talked about tuberous roots and tubers. So because those are the 5 identification things. So remember I gave you that there's 5 things. There's the true bulbs, the comers, the tubers, the rhizomes, because we're talking about rhizomes, and then there's tuberous roots. So tubers are like begonias and ranunculus and also potatoes, gingers, and yam. Ginger and yam. So those are the type of things. And so this is a sweet potato, and this is a tuberous root. So a potato is a tuber, and this is a tuberous root. And it's just the way it's divided is how it stores, if it's in the root or if it's part of the stem. So that's rather interesting. Another thing that I have to tell you that is a little frightening, so I'm glad you're sitting down. Another rhizome that you never want to plant, unless you're one of those people, is Bermuda grass. So Bermuda grass and mint, they are both rhizomes, and that's why they grow out and they grow very well. So and you never want to plant them even in the spring or the fall. So I thought that was very interesting about that.
I have a question. On your handout it says you plant rhizomes in the fall.
Yes, these can be planted. These
Spring or
particular.
fall.
Yes,
Well,
they bloom in the spring. So that's why it says spring, is because you plant them in the fall. Now, cannas, you can plant them now, but canna, they still bloom during the summer too, but they'll start in the spring or late spring. So the other thing is, a lot of people say, well, I can plant bearded iris in the summer, or I can plant them in the spring. Well, you can, but the best time to plant them is in the fall, because you give them an opportunity to grow. And the thing is we want success. So you can do it different ways, but you might not have the success. So that's why I'm telling you these particular things. And then some of the plants, even though you plant them in the spring and they bloom in the summer, some of them can winter over, but not all of them. So you really need to always read the instructions on your bulbs, unless it's something you know. But I have a really good, there's a reference in the back, and there are 2 references, and one of them is from the University of Tennessee, and it tells you a lot of things about the different bulbs and when to plant them and hardy and stuff, and that's on the back of your handout. And then also there's from the University of Colorado, Colorado State University. They have some really good information too about bulbs, and that's on the back. I've included 2 of my favorite things. So now when you're selecting a bulb, a lot of times you have to buy a bulb in a package like this. So you do your best to look at it and make sure that it's not damaged. You want to make sure the tunicate is on it. So if you took the tunicate off, the tunicate, the very first one, so you have the first choice, second choice, and a walk away. I just thought that was fabulous. But the tunicate on the first one is still intact, and then the second choice, if it's missing a little bit of the tunicate, it's really hard for me to do this, but if it's missing the tunicate, it's not going to hurt it, but it has a chance of already drying out, and I can't even take this off. easily without damaging it, but it just means that your bulb is drying out. Now remember, it stores water and nutrients in this bulb, so it should be heavy because it has moisture in it. If it starts getting dry, the drier it gets, it's going to look like the walk away. So you want to make sure that it has, if you have a chance, even when you're looking at bulbs in a package, just see how heavy they are for the size that they are. And then make sure if it is a tunicate, or you want to make sure it has this little tunicate on it. And the other thing is, if bulbs start smelling funny, that means they're probably starting to mold. They smell. They don't smell. So if they start smelling earthy or something, you don't want to get them. And then also, y'all can, you know what a bruised bulb feels like. Think about this. This has been in the refrigerator. It accidentally got put in with the lettuce, and it's soft. And so, of course, I'm not going to eat this one, but it was great for the coming here today. It's this last hurrah. But you don't want to buy a bulb that's a little bit squishy or it's bruised. And then also, I have seen bulbs that have been nicked by the thing that you dig them up. So you don't want to get a bulb that's damaged, because it's not that it won't grow, but you're already setting up for disease and problems. So I'm not saying you can't, but I'm trying to tell you the best way to do it. So, and then also, talk about location. Most bulbs, they like to be in sunny places. So when you're planting your bulbs, like for your yard, they like the sun. Now, buttercups, or not really buttercups, daffodils and jonquils, they don't mind being in dappled shade or at the edge of the woods, because they're coming up before the leaves come out. And so that's not a problem at all. But most of the bulbs, like tulips and hyacinths and some of these other ones, and it's not that they can't come up through the shaded areas, like where there's trees, they can come up and sprout. The thing is when after they bloom, the leaves are still up and they have to do photosynthesis. If they can't get enough light to do the appropriate amount of photosynthesis to send those nutrients back into the bulb, then your next year is not going to be as pretty, or at all. You might just get leaves but nothing else. So that's why it's important to put them in a sunny spot. The other thing that I've learned is when you put them out, there's a difference. Like if you put them on the south side of your house and you get that radial heat, they might come up sooner, but you still have a chance of having them be killed back by like a heavy freeze or something like that. So you might want to think about that before you put them like really too close to the house. That's the only thing. And then another thing that is important to know is bulbs do not like wet feet. Now I do have this amaryllis, and he is happy in this, but he's already bloomed. He was last year's, but he just wouldn't die. So I keep watering him, but my other one's getting ready to come back. But they don't like to be covered. I mean, he's got roots right here, and he doesn't like to travel. I'm sorry. I'm really not that bad a gardener, but they will rot if they have too much water. Now there's a couple of things that don't mind it, like a water lily. They like the water, water iris, and water chestnut. They all have water at the beginning of them, but they really don't mind being moist. But most bulbs, they don't like to be wet, so you keep them a little, they need moisture, but they don't like to be soaking in water. So that's one thing that you have to make sure is they don't have wet feet. And let's see, the next thing is preparing for the fall planting. So I've read several different things, and I think that the biggest thing is when you pick your location, it's good to do a soil test, because the bulbs like a pH between 6 and 7. However, you can do the soil test, which of course we would recommend you do the soil test so that you can cut out on your problems and your headaches and things like that, and amend your soil to do that. Also, when you're digging your soil, clay soil is fabulous, as master gardeners know, but you do have to put some compost and some amendments like that to make it a little bit more healthy. And there's some things that you can do to amend your soil, but mainly the composting and things like that. But they did say that it's good to dig up your soil in a little bit, not just a little hole, even though I'll tell you about that in a minute, but it's good to kind of turn it over to the depth that you're going to plant and do it more than just one little hole. And then the other thing that I was going to tell you about is when to buy the bulbs and when you should plant. So right now is the time to buy the bulbs that are plant in the fall and bloom in the spring. If you the bulbs, they go through that cycle. Like, so we're talking about fall bulbs. You plant them in the fall, their roots start coming out, and then they emerge in the spring, they bloom, and then they die back and they go through that dormant period. These have been harvested in the dormant period. So they've already gotten all their nutrients back, and then they're ready to go. So that's why you buy them now, because this is when they're dormant, they're healthy, and then you plant them. And the reason why you plant them in September through November is now it's still hard to say that we're getting moisture right now in September, but we're getting ready to start getting more moisture. That's when the roots can start growing, and we want them to be in the ground before it freezes. They said that it's best to have them at least 6 weeks in the ground before we start getting our first freeze. So we could go through November, but it's best to go ahead, I think, in October. So when you plant them, you still need to keep them wet until we start getting some rain. Now, right now, I've got something to show you. These are fresh, straight out of the raised bed. These are my fabulous daffodils. And you can see what they're doing. They're already putting their roots down. They'll go back to bed when I get home. But these are, this is what they're doing right now. So that's the reason why you want to go ahead and put your bulbs in the ground right now, because this gets them established and they're ready. And so your bulbs are growing right now when you put them in the ground. And see, these are the little bulblets that it can't come off this one, and that's one reason why you never have to replant daffodils unless you want to keep them going out. But that's why you plant them now, so that they can get established. Also, the true bulbs and the corms and the rhizomes, they do need that period of chilling, which that's another word for us is vernalization. They have to have that. It's just kind of like some seeds have to, they have to go through the winter process, the cold process. Well, vernalization is what the bulbs need to go through to get cool. Yes?
How long a period of cycle is that?
Well, if you put them in right now, they go through the winter, and that's the cold period. They just need a couple of, few months. Now, if you're forcing bulbs, then there are some different rules. Like I think tulips require a longer, like if you're going to force them indoors, the tulips have a longer period than like the paper whites. In chilling in the refrigerator, not the freezer, but the refrigerator. But we have a video on that, on how to force bulbs. But also you can look at the research on, sometimes they'll say it on the back, or sometimes you'll just have to look it up if you want to force them. For like if you want paper whites at Christmas time, you can go ahead and start chilling them now, and then you can force them to bloom for Christmas time. But the winter, just being in the ground, that's the appropriate amount of chilling or vernalization that they need to be able to emerge in the spring. So but the big thing is you want healthy roots, because that's the base of your fabulous plants. Now, there's some different tools that you can use, and I think most of us know, I think all of the master gardeners know what this is. It's a horry knife, or a garden knife, but I like it. I had a fabulous friend give this to me, and you know who you are. But it does have the inches on here, so if you can't figure out the inches on your finger, you can look at this, and this tells you how deep to plant it, and I really like this. Now, the other thing, this is on loan from my fabulous parents, and this is a bulb digger. It's a planting tool, and you can also dig other things, like if you're putting in annuals, but Dad was showing me last night that this actually shows you can slip on the bottom, and it'll give you like 2 inches, and then this one will, the other one, it comes with different sizes, and this will give you like 4 inches or something like that. So it's rather interesting. But I did read, even though this is a really cool thing, I did read that it's better not to dig a little pot for your bulbs. It's better to dig a little like an area and turn it over so it has good circulation. I'm not saying plow it up, but it's better if it has just a little bit more. I'll set this down here, because I will drop it. Okay, so, and then the hand thing is, yes, I'm very technical. The hand digger, that's also a good tool, but I think the biggest thing is to go ahead and turn it up, and if you need that to actually give your measurements on the inches, then you can use that. And then, of course, the auger is another one. Now, how to plant them. So, this is something that gets a little confusing for people, but it's really not that confusing. So, when you're planting and you're preparing your soil, Your plants, remember I told you that they like the high pH, but also the very first thing that they're doing is they're putting roots down. So you've got your N, P, and K, your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Well, this one right here, the phosphorus, that's what's going to put the roots down. That's going to kind of make it start growing. So I think about phosphorus as like our vitamin D. If we take vitamin D, it helps us absorb all the other vitamins that we're taking. Otherwise, if we're low on vitamin D, then our body's not picking up all the vitamins that we take, like C and all the other stuff we could take. The P helps the plants sit down healthy, strong roots, and that's always the most important thing to start off with is high roots or healthy roots. So one of the things that you can do is when you're getting your fertilizer, you want the middle one to be, it doesn't need to be high, but that's the one you're kind of looking at. You don't want to shock your plants by putting like a 47 in the middle. That's not what I'm talking about. But they do need a little bit because your soil might not have enough potassium. Nitrogen, potassium, no, phosphorus. Might not have enough phosphorus. So I did get a couple of things. This is bulb tone, and anything with tone is very good. And this one, I'm so technical. But it's got a 5. It's a 3, 5, 3. But the middle one is the highest one. It's not high, but it's going to be good. And it's just a low-grade fertilizer. And the bulbs don't need a whole lot the very first year, except for the phosphorus. But they don't need just a whole lot. It's the next year that they might need a little bit of boosting. Then also, another thing that you can get is bone meal. Now, I've always heard bone meal, you wouldn't need to add these two together, but if you notice, bone meal is 10. It's 0, 10, 0. So that is the only thing that has in it is the phosphorus. So that was interesting to see that, and you can see it better from here. But but when you do it, when you put that in, they said it's better to mix it in with your soil, not to put like a little coating on it, and then put the bulb, the basal plate right on top of it, because that's not healthy for the bulb, and you could damage it because it's too much of a good thing. So and if you dig a little hole like a pot, it would be easy to have it just straight on the bottom. Yes.
So I have a whole yard full of various things already planted. So how would I apply fertilizer to them now without digging them all up, because I can't do that?
Okay, that is a really good question. So if you do have bulbs already planted, how do you fertilize them? Because you're not going to go back down and put this on. And there is a way that you can put it on the top. You can top dress it, and it would go down. I don't know about bone meal. I know you can do it with this. I haven't read this, but I think that you can. But I do know it takes a little bit of time to go down into the soil. So it might be something that's more like
I've
that.
used bone meal before, and we have wild animals that come in our yard, and they like the bone meal.
Well, and that's what I've read too, but then also read some other things that they have it processed now so that it isn't as interesting to animals. But now the proof is in the pudding on that one, because I've heard both ways. But now the things I read, it says, well, bone meal is not the bone meal you used to put down where animals from all over would come. But now if they come, to yours,
I haven't used it in a few years because I didn't like replanting.
I didn't like that either. It's a big smorgasbord. I mean, it's already hard enough to keep the animals away, but if you call them in with bone meal. But anyways, that's the research that I read, because I thought the same thing. It's like, how can they tell us to do that? But they said it's a different bone meal. So let's see. Now, when you're planting, you always now I always use my squishy onion, but this is the nose part. So you always put that pointing up, and then your basal plate's at the bottom. And if you don't know, plant it sideways. And it's like, so there's no question about this onion. There's no question about this daffodil, and there's no question about the garlic. But some other ones, I didn't see anything in here that was questionable, but they said, always put the nose up. Now, when you plant them, we're going to talk about how deep and things like that, but when you plant them after you cover them back up, it is good to put some mulch on top of it. Pine straw is probably one of the best things because it breathes really well, but it's not that you want to keep them super wet, but what moisture is on there, you don't want it to evaporate, so it's very good to keep some mulch on top of it. And you can do like shredded leaves, or you can do pine bark and or, just bark in itself. But, and then also, as once the plant gets up and you start seeing green, then you can put some nitrogen on it. And the nitrogen also helps with the flowering part of it. But the plants, for the most part, at the very beginning, they have enough to get up except for the phosphorus. So, the next thing is when you're planting, it's very important to know your bulb. So you can take a measure, unless you know I noticed you can measure it on your finger, but I can't do that. But this one is 4 inches wide, so you measure it from the width, not the top here, but the width right here. And that's how you decide how deep to plant it and how far apart you plant them. So the rule of thumb is to plant, now you will see other things say 2 to 3 inches, but we're going to use a flat 3 inches, 3 times the bulb's width. So if this is 4 inches, you'd say 3 times 4 is 12. So you would plant these 12 inches apart if you're going to do a bulb like this. And then also, so I want to make sure I told you that. And then also another, so you would plant them 12 inches apart, but one of the reasons why you plant them far apart rather than right together is, now a bulb, this onion you're going to harvest, but do you want to harvest this every year, the paper white? You're not going to want to harvest it, so you're going to give it room to grow and spread out. And then in 3 to 5 years, you can dig it up. Of course, that's another class altogether, but that's one reason why you don't want to put them too close together. I mean, they'll still be beautiful, but you don't want to stack them on top of each other because you want to give them room to grow and slow your work down so you won't have to do as much. And then this is one of the interesting things, so we're going to talk about depth in a minute, but if you'll see that this, when you're planting it, you'll put, like, this is going to be 12 inches apart, you would measure from it wouldn't be from here to there, it'd be the middle, and you just measure, spread them out that way. But the big thing is you don't want to have to dig and divide until you have to. You don't want to have to do it next year. Now this one, this particular chart, well, it's the next one because it has rhizomes on it. But this is very, very good. So it's on your handout. But it tells you the depth and kind of gives you an idea. So the crocus, the smaller the bulb, of course we're using that as the general term, the smaller the bulb, the more shallow it will go. But again, it's based on how wide it is. So if this is 4 inches, then you would say 3 times 4 is 12, and so you would put it 12 inches down. Now, that's a really deep bulb because that's 8 inches, but that's the rule of thumb. The allium is at 8 inches, so we would say it's either, 4, like 2 times 4 is 8, so it's either 2 inches across or a little bit, so we'll use a different measuring. But anyways, so this is really interesting. But also, I want to tell you that when you're measuring it, so say your crocus has to be 2 inches down, you're going to have the basal plate at the 2 inch mark. It's not going to be the nose, it's the basal plate. So you're going to make sure that it's not too deep. Now another thing is, if I planted the crocus too deep, if I planted it on the level of the tulip, it's kind of like a seed. It will grow, but it won't be able, a crocus is not that tall. And so it won't have enough energy in that little bulb to emerge and then start with the photosynthesis. It will grow, but then it'll stop because it doesn't have enough energy to get out. So that's why you want to make sure you pay attention to the depth that you plant a bulb. And then also, if you plant bulbs too shallow, like if I planted a tulip right at the top, like where I would plant a crocus, it would come up fast, but it wouldn't have the strength. I mean, it wouldn't have the root system. It would be too shallow, and so it's not going to be as strong as it should be. And it might come up too soon. And see, tulips, they're not early bloomers like crocus, but if they start, it's not that they're not growing already, but you want to give them time so that the weather is warmed up before they actually emerge. So the next thing is rhizomes. Now remember we said that rhizomes grow flat, horizontal to the ground. And so our little rhizome over here, let's just say that that's a bearded iris, that you plant those shallow. And a lot of times you see people just throw out irises and they're on top of the ground. Well, they can do that, but they run the risk of drying out. So it's better that you cover them with just an inch of soil, and then you can put some mulch on top of it. That is the best way. I'm not saying you can't do it the other way, but it's much better. We try to give you the best ways to do things, the research ways to do it. So put about an inch of soil, and then also always put A rhizome, they're a little bit more, they're not as easy to see as your true bulb, because the nose and the basal plate, but you usually will see a root. So always put the, Master Gardeners, y'all know this about, put the roots down. Always put the roots down. And let's see. Well, before I get to the summary, let me tell you a couple more things, because we're almost done. When your bulbs bloom, remember they go through a cycle. So they're doing roots right now. So we're going to plant our fall bulbs right now. They're going to start doing those underground roots, and they're going to be happy, 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 and they're going to be growing, but you won't be able to see them. And then they're going to emerge in the spring, and then they're going to put up some blooms, and then they're going to die back. The blooms, you can trim the blooms off anytime after they've bloomed. Once they've done that, the leaves are going to be green, and they're going to drive you crazy because you're ready to move on. You need to leave them. Even as they're turning yellow, you need to let them go. The reason why is that is part of their life cycle, and they're putting that energy, they're doing the photosynthesis, and they're putting the energy back into the bulb so they can do it all over again next year. If you cut them, like some people mow them down or cut them, and it makes it look pretty, but you're damaging the bulb. I'm not saying it won't come up next year, but it won't be as healthy, and eventually you might not have bulbs at all, like blooms. You might have the stems come up, but not anything else. Bulbs are mainly perennials, but tulips and hyacinths, they usually last only 2 years, unless they're in the perfect spot. And even then, I was reading the research, and it says they might be so happy that they're making bulblets, and so they're not the original bulb, they're just the new little plants. But some people say, well, I've had my tulips for 40 years. It's like, well, we would have to study that, but they said typically if I planted this, it's mainly 2 years. I do know, I saw this fabulous study, and they actually, the first year tulips grow in Holland, they cut them down. As soon as they start blooming, they take these big tractors and cut all the blooms off, because they don't want the energy going into the bloom. They want it going back into the bulb, and then they prepare it and send it to us. So all of these are already, of course, a year old, and that's why you might not get much out of them. So that's rather interesting. So leave your stems until they finish their cycle. And then also, I have read a lot of people have squirrels and vermin that want to eat their bulbs, and deer, of course, would eat your bulbs too if they just knew to look down there, but don't tell them they're there. But a lot of people, I've seen on the research I was doing, a lot of people put the mesh wire down, think about chicken wire or something big enough that the stems, the leaves will come through, but the vermin will not be able to get to it. I'm talking about rodents, the chipmunks, the squirrels, and so they have a hard time digging down into that. And then, of course, you just cover it with mulch, or your soil, a little bit of soil, and then mulch. So that's one of the things that I read, because that's one of the things I have a problem with, is I have things that want to eat things they shouldn't. And so, anyways, I think that we've covered most everything today. So you know what a geophyte is? It's a bulb. It's just a different name for a bulb, and and the reason why they're called bulbs is they're perennials, but they have their storage in an organ under the ground, and that's where they keep all their nutrients and moisture, and they can repeat it. So it's different than a seed, because a seed has a seed. The seed doesn't come back and back and back each year. It reseeds itself, or it produces new seeds, but the whole life cycle is not in that seed, but in a bulb it is. Then we talk mainly about true bulbs, cormers, and rhizomes, because those are mainly the things that you plant right now. And then the tubers and tuberous roots, those are things that you plant in the spring. Also, we covered how to pick out your bulbs and be wise about your bulbs. I will tell you that I was able to hand pick these paper whites out from Mayo, but most everything else, this also came from Mayo, but it comes in a bag. So it would be fun if you got to pick out all your stuff by hand, but you don't. But I thought that was interesting that I get to pick the things out and actually look at them before I buy them. And then also the location where you plant them, they always like the sunny areas, unless it's something like a daffodil, and they can handle a little bit of shade. There's a couple of things else like crocus and stuff, but you just want to make sure that it get at least 6 hours of sun They said that was but like tulips and some other things, they need a lot more sun. And then as you're preparing the soil, you know how to put down the fertilizer. You want to make sure that you have, mix it in with your soil, don't have it touched directly. And then timing is, the fall bulbs are the spring bloomers are planted right now in the fall. This is a perfect time to go and buy them or order them. And the bloom, so that's what we talked about today, but if there are bulbs that bloom in the summer, you'll plant them in the spring. So there's two different kinds. And then also we talked about how wide we need to plant them and how deep we need to plant them. And I think that as you go through it, there's lots of information out there, so you can look at that. I've given you 2 websites to go on the back, but then as you get into it and you have more questions, you always call Ask a Master Gardener, and this is also on the back of your handout, or you call the Knox County Extension Helpline and they'll give you some more information. So, again, I'll take questions, but I am so glad y'all came today. It's the best group came today, so I appreciate it. So, Lindsay, what's your question?
Yes, do you recommend any places that you can order from that you know that you're going to get a viable bulb?
So the question is, where can you order bulbs that is a good bulb place that has a reputable company? So, Marcia, I will defer to you. Where would you order bulbs?
Well, we don't generally make that type of recommendation, but
Okay.
what I would say is, when I'm buying anything online, before I actually look at the product they're selling, I go and check what is their warranty. If it doesn't grow, will they replace it or refund my money? And if they don't do that, I don't even look at their catalog.
That was an excellent question. So, especially when you don't get a chance to look at it. So I would look at the reviews and then also the warranty, see if they would replace it if it's a puny thing. So, now there's a bunch of more information about how to dig bulbs, how to divide bulbs, how to store bulbs, but that's for another class. So,
Is some of that done in the fall, or some of the, or is
I
that
think
the
most of
different-
it's after they bloom. So, yeah, so you would do it like, so irises,
So
you
we
would.
don't have to worry about that now?
No, you don't have to worry about right now. So it'd be more in late spring or late summer, but not right now. So that's a good question about when to divide. So, oh, yes, you have one more?
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Gladiolas, if I can.
Okay, that was a really good question. So, for everybody, just to make sure you could, especially for the video, if you have gladiolas, they bloom in the summer. And so how do you take them, because where we are in zone 7B, or 7A if you're a little bit further north, what do you do in order to store them? You can leave them in the ground, but gladiolas, because it just depends on where they are in your yard. If they're in a warmer spot versus, and higher up is always a little bit warmer than low because the cold air settles. So what I've read, and of course today's about fall bulbs blooming in the spring, but I did read a little bit about that, and it said to wait for them to die back, and then you can pull them up. So don't pull them up yet, wait for them, the green to die back, then you can pull them up and store them. You let them dry, like out on the driveway or something, let them dry just a little bit and then store them. I'm not sure I read that you should store them in the refrigerator, but a cool, dry, dark spot, like in the garage where it's not getting a lot of, probably the garage is not getting a lot of light. Well, if you are having good luck with them coming back year after year, where they are, I would leave them. But if you're having to plant them every year and you like, I'm tired of planting them, I'm going to save them, then that's when I would because they're not in the perfect spot. So I would dig them up and so that you could plant them next year. But if they're coming back every year, then I might leave them out there. But
Till we get a bad winter freeze.
Well,
And then that's all.
well, then you know,
I would
gardening
be
is
in-
all one big experiment.
I would be inclined to leave them in the ground and put a nice layer of mulch on top.
That is another good point because that holds in, putting mulch on the top will hold some warmth in there, and that would be good too. So I think that's it. So thank you very much for coming. And